I was never the favorite child, at least not in my father's eyes. From the very beginning, I always felt like the odd piece in a puzzle that was supposed to fit perfectly, but somehow never did. My name is Alina, and if you asked my father, Richard, to describe me, he would probably say something cold, like she's stubborn, emotional, and too much like her mother. He never called me my daughter with pride in his voice. Not once. I grew up in a house that was more like a museum of appearances than a home. My father was a businessman, always chasing bigger contracts, fancier cars, and the admiration of neighbors. My mother, Anna, was gentle but withdrawn, often standing silently in the background while my father controlled every dinner conversation, every holiday plan, every decision that affected our lives. And then there was my older brother, Daniel, the golden child, the star, the son who could do no wrong. When he played baseball in high school, Dad sat in the front row with a booming voice, cheering like his life depended on Daniel hitting a home run. When Daniel announced he wanted to study law, Dad practically popped champagne bottles in the living room. But when I came home with my sketchbook full of drawings, excited to show the worlds I'd created on paper, Dad barely looked up from his laptop. "That's nice," he muttered. Or worse, "Art won't pay the bills, Alina. Be realistic." That sentence, "be realistic," haunted me. Every time I tried to share a dream, every time I wanted his approval, it was thrown back at me like an insult. It wasn't just small things. It was everything. Daniel got the bigger bedroom. Daniel got the car when he turned 16. When I asked for one, Dad said, "Girls don't need cars. Your brother needs it for football practice." Even at family dinners, the favoritism was obvious. If Daniel talked about his classes, Dad leaned forward, his eyes shining. If I mentioned my day, Dad would interrupt with, "Pass the potatoes," as though I wasn't even speaking. I tried to brush it off. I told myself, he's just old-fashioned. He doesn't mean to hurt me. But as the years passed, the truth became undeniable. To him, Daniel was the heir, the continuation of his legacy. And I was just there. My mother noticed. She tried, in small ways, to make me feel loved. She'd slip me notes in my lunchbox. "Don't listen to your father. I'm proud of you." Or she'd stay up late to help me sew costumes for the school play when Dad scoffed at the idea. But even she seemed powerless against him. Sometimes I wondered if she was afraid. Afraid that if she spoke up too loudly, he'd turn his coldness on her too. One memory is burned into my mind. I was 12 years old, and it was Daniel's birthday. He had a huge party in the backyard with balloons, catered food, even a clown my father had hired. Everyone was there. Cousins, uncles, family, friends. At one point, Daniel unwrapped a brand new laptop. Everyone clapped, cheering as if he'd just won an Olympic medal. I stood in the corner, clutching a small sketchbook I'd bought him with my saved allowance money. When I gave it to him, he barely looked at it before tossing it aside. My father chuckled. "Well, Daniel's not much of an artist, Alina. He's got bigger things ahead." The crowd laughed lightly, moving on. But I stood there, burning with shame. That was the first time I thought, maybe I really don't belong in this family. By the time I reached my 20s, the divide was a canyon. Daniel had gone off to law school with Dad, funding every penny, bragging to anyone who would listen about my son, the future lawyer. Meanwhile, I worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for art school. Dad refused to help. "If you want to waste time on painting, that's your choice," he told me. "But don't expect me to fund your hobby." A hobby. That's all my dreams were to him. So I poured myself into my art, not because I wanted to prove him wrong, but because it was the only thing that felt truly mine. Each canvas was a world where I mattered, where my voice was heard, my emotions painted in strokes of color he would never understand. But even as I tried to build a life of my own, I couldn't escape the pull of family obligations. Weddings, holidays, birthdays. They were stages where Dad performed his perfect family act. And I was expected to play my role, smiling in the background like an extra in someone else's story. It was around my 28th birthday that things began to unravel in ways I never imagined. My father's business, the empire he had built and idolized, started to crack. Bad investments, lawsuits, whispers of debts he couldn't cover. He never admitted it openly, but I could see the tension in the way he snapped at my mother. The late-night phone calls, the empty look in his eyes when he thought no one was watching. Daniel, of course, was positioned as the savior. Dad pushed him harder into the family business, grooming him to take over, to restore what was falling apart. I was invisible as usual. Until one day, I walked into the kitchen and overheard them talking. Dad's voice was sharp, almost desperate. "Daniel, you're the future of this family. Everything I've worked for, Rit's all going to you. You'll carry the Lawson name with pride." Daniel hesitated. "And Alina." My father's reply cut me deeper than any knife ever could. "Alina, she's not family." "Not really. She made her choice when she walked away from responsibility. She's just background." I froze, my chest tightening. My own father had said it out loud, the words I had feared for years. She's not family. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. It wasn't just neglect. It was rejection. A deliberate erasure of who I was in his eyes. That night I asked my mother about it. I found her sitting in her armchair, knitting quietly, as if the world wasn't falling apart around her. "Mom," I whispered, my voice shaking, "do you really think I'm not family?" Her hands stilled. She looked at me with eyes full of sorrow, but said nothing. Not one word. That silence was louder than any scream. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, my father's words echoing in my head like a cruel mantra. Not family. Not family. But beneath the pain, something else stirred. A seed of resolve. If he truly believed I wasn't family, then maybe it was time to show him who I really was. Not the invisible daughter, not the shadow behind Daniel, but someone strong, someone he couldn't ignore. And as fate would have it, an opportunity was about to present itself, one that would shake the foundation of everything my father thought he controlled. The invitation arrived on heavy cream. Cardstock that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and obligation. Gold embossed letters announced, "A night to honor legacy, the Lawson Foundation Gala." The date was 2 Saturdays away. The venue, our family home, of course. It always was. My father liked to parade success on familiar ground, as if the walls themselves could testify on his behalf. I stood at my kitchen sink, invitation balanced on the rim of a chipped bowl, and read it twice. The Lawson Foundation had existed for as long as I could remember. Donations, scholarships, press releases that somehow managed to celebrate my father more than the people supposedly helped. But this was different. At the bottom, a line glinted like a hook. Special announcement regarding succession. Succession. The word coiled in my stomach. I could already picture it. Dad on the steps, the rented chandeliers glinting. Daniel at his side, maybe a microphone shared between their same-shaped hands. The heir apparent and the king. I could also imagine my own role somewhere in the back. Clutching a glass of sparkling water so the staff wouldn't offer me wine I couldn't afford to replace if I dropped it. I told myself I wouldn't go. I said it out loud in my empty apartment. I won't go. My voice thinned into the hallway and came back flimsy. Because even when my father said I wasn't family, I still felt the tug of the house where I'd learned to braid my hair and hide my tears. Not family. The words were a bruise that hadn't faded. But family, even a cruel one, is a gravity you don't easily escape. Mom called the next day. "You got the invitation." Her voice was careful, the way you carry a cracked bowl. "I did." There was a pause. "It would mean a lot if you came." "Would it mean anything to Dad?" I asked. Another pause. "It would mean something to me." I caved. I always did for her. "I'll come." "Where something you love?" she said softly, and then hung up as if the conversation had already cost her too much. On the night of the gala, the house looked like an apology wrapped in glitter. The lawn was a sea of white tents, the kind with cathedral windows and obedient ropes staked into the ground like they knew their place. Strings of lights made the hedges glow. Neighbors would be peeking through their curtains. I knew the way my father liked, their envy feeding him better than the catered steak. I arrived early because traffic made me anxious, and because I wanted a moment to myself. I wore a black dress with a low back and a gold bracelet my mother had given me the year she taught me how to use a sewing machine. My hair was pinned up, and I felt like I had stepped into a costume. Be realistic, Dad would say. Don't pretend. The valet took my car like he was accepting a secret. At the door, a young woman with a clipboard and a tight bun smiled past me. Vendor's load-in is around the side. I'm not a vendor, I said. She checked her list again, lips pursed. Name Alina Lawson. Something flickered across her face. Recognition or pity. Of course. I'm so sorry, Miss Lawson. You're just a bit early. She handed me a thin plastic bracelet, the kind used to identify guests at festivals. It was white. On the table next to us, a stack of gold bracelets glinted. I glanced between them. Different tiers. I asked. She smiled too brightly. Just different zones for access. Right? I said, and slid the white band over my wrist. The plastic whispered as it tightened. Inside the house smelled like polished wood and lilies. The portraits had been rearranged so that my father's oil-painted face. Commissioned the year the foundation launched hung where Mom's favorite landscape used to be. I paused in the foyer. On the entry table. The family photo from Daniel's law school graduation had been framed in a gold border and placed front and center. Mom's smile looked small next to Dad's grin. My own face had been washed out by the flash as if I was already fading even then. Lena. Mom's voice drifted down the stairs. She moved toward me like mist, her silver earrings trembling. She pressed her palms to my arms, warm but fluttery, like she might fly away. You look beautiful. So do you, I said, and I meant it. She wore navy satin and her hair was swept back. But there was a bruise of worry under her eyes, like a storm on a horizon. Come, she said, looping her arm in mine. Let me show you the room. The room was the library where Dad kept leather-bound books he never read and crystal decanters he always did. Tonight it had been transformed into a staging area caterer slipping in and out. A table piled with white place cards in elegant cursive. My mother stopped at the cards and scanned them the way she used to scan my face for scratches when I came home late. Her fingers hovered over one. There you are. I found my name, Ms. Alina Lawson. Table 12. I glanced at the other cards. Daniel's card, Mr. Daniel Lawson, was table 1. Dad's was table 1. So were the board members, the donors, the people whose names made waiters stand up straighter. Table 12, I said lightly. Lucky number. Mom winced. It was all decided without me. I know, I said. Don't worry. Come with me, she whispered. Just for a minute. She pulled me down the hall, past the smell of butter and garlic, and into the formal dining room. It gleamed long tables under shimmering cloths, place settings lined like soldiers. At the far end, near the stage, Table 1 sat under a spill of white roses, like a bride's train. Table 12 was near the doors where the drafts snuck in. Great acoustics back here, I joked. Perfect for hearing announcements through the hum of the buffet. Alina. It's fine, I said, but I could feel the old sting rising. That ridiculous plastic bracelet cut cold into my skin. I wanted to rip it off. I kept it on. Voices swelled from the foyer. Guests were arriving, the mayor, Dad's golf buddies. Daniel with his girlfriend, Sabine, who wore red lipstick and an expression that invited cameras. I braced myself as Dad's laugh rolled over the room like thunder. He entered the dining room and filled it the way he always did. He spotted me. For a moment, his eyes did a simple math. Alina plus black dress plus early. A fraction of a smile. Then calculation. Lena, he said, moving toward me, his hand extended like a businessman sealing a deal he already owned. He kissed my cheek. It felt like a stamp. Good to see you. You look nice. Thanks, I said. He turned to my mother. Everything is in order. As much as it can be, she said, her voice bland and careful. Dad clapped his hands once and the room quieted like it knew the choreography. Tonight, he said, raising his glass, though it wasn't time for a toast, we celebrate what we've built and what we'll continue to build. He looked toward the stage where a banner hung. The Lawson Foundation, Legacy in Action. Behind me, a staff member touched my elbow. "Ms. Lawson, could you help with the programs? We're short-handed." I blinked. "I'm a guest." Her face flushed. I'm so sorry. They said family usually pitches in early." They said, "Family?" I repeated. I suppressed a laugh that tasted like something broken. "I'm sure someone from Table 1 will be thrilled to help." I moved away before she could answer. The room filled. Laughter braided itself into the music the quartet played near the bar. I caught sight of Daniel and Sabine accepting congratulations. Sabine was all angles and polish. She spotted me and waved her grin too eager. "Alina, there you are. Come say hi." She turned to Daniel. "Your sister looks stunning, babe." Daniel squeezed my shoulder when I reached them. "Hey, Leon." "Hey," I said. "Big night." He smirked. "You know, Dad, any excuse for a stage." He leaned closer. "Stay clear if he starts listing donors. You'll fall asleep standing up. Good advice." I waited. I waited for him to say something else. Something like, "Sorry about table 12." Something like I told him to cut it out. Instead, he glanced over my shoulder at a man in a tux and bright blue tie, and his eyes sparkled like coins. Later, he said, already gone, his hand warm on my back for a second, and then not. "Family photo in 10. A photographer shouted. "Immediate family first." I froze. The words felt like a trapdoor opening under my feet. Immediate family. I watched Dad herd people toward the grand staircase like livestock. Richard Sabine purred. "Where should I stand?" "With Daniel, of course," Dad said with a wink. "Immediate family," the photographer repeated. And I started toward the staircase because that is what I had always been told to do. Peer, smile, fit yourself into the available space. "Lena," Dad said, and there was that tone polite enough for witnesses, sharp enough to cut. He tilted his head toward the crowd of board members watching with hungry eyes. "We're doing the Lawson line shot first." I stood there, breath caught like a fishbone. "I'm Lawson," I said, too calmly. "We'll do extended after," he said. "You can be in that one." He was already moving my mother into place, his hand at her back firm, the way a handler moves a horse. A long second dragged its feet. People shifted. The photographer hesitated. My cheeks flamed. "Don't cry." I heard my voice in my head, high and little girl. "Don't give him that." I stepped back. Someone behind me murmured, "Oh!" Another voice said, "Awkward." A third, "She should understand. Optics matter." Sabine leaned down the row of steps, whispering loud, "It's just for the brand shot, Alina. Don't make it a thing." She smiled like she had done me a favor, and my hands curled into fists against my dress. Mom looked at me then. A look that said, "I'm sorry and I'm afraid." I lifted my chin and pretended I hadn't seen. The photographer's camera clicked. Flash, flash. Dad's smile was an irrefutable argument. Daniel's jaw was set the way it always was when he wanted to look older than he felt. The board members beamed because they love proximity to power more than people. The Lawson line was captured without me. I stood 3 steps down at the edge of the frame, a ghost just outside the story. Extended family. The photographer called, and suddenly half the room surged forward. Cousins, spouses, donors who called themselves like family. I hand Sabine slightly tugged my sleeve as if I might run away. "Come on," she said. "This is yours." I let myself be placed 3 rows back, beside a cousin I hadn't seen since she borrowed my favorite sweater and never returned it. The flash popped again and again. I was probably smiling in one of them. It would look fine on a Christmas card. It would look like a family that worked. Dinner settled around us, a choreography of plates and delicate forks. I found table 12 by the door. The place cards read like a list of afterthoughts. A junior associate from Dad's firm. The mayor's assistant's assistant. A cousin's date who chewed loudly. An elderly neighbor who tried to engage me in a conversation about the decline of manners. "People these days," she said, glancing at my tattoo, a small line drawing at my wrist, "they think ink is identity. I tucked my hand under the table. The salad arrived, and then the steak. And then a sorbet because apparently our palates needed resetting before the next course. I watched table one laugh in sync. Every time Dad raised his glass, the room lifted theirs too, like a field of flowers turning toward the sun. At one point, he caught me watching and nodded once, as if to say, "See what I can do?" When the lights dimmed and a spotlight found the stage, my stomach did a tight roll. My father ascended the steps with the gentle gravity of a man who had never once tripped in public. He adjusted the microphone. The room hushed. Even the quartet stopped mid-phrase. "Friends," Dad said, "tonight is a celebration, yes, but it's also a promise." He spread his hands. He had the cadence of a preacher and the bullet points of a CEO. He talked about legacy, about building something that would outlast us all, about the responsibility of a name. He did not mention the people the foundation actually helped. He did not mention how many dollars went to administration versus impact. He did not mention my mother's quiet hours volunteering in the background, or my own small donation from a gallery commission a year ago, money I had saved instead of buying new shoes. "And," he said, voice mellow, "I have an announcement. The board has unanimously approved." I caught a few stiff nods at unanimously. The board approved what my father told them to approve, the transition plan for the foundation and for my business holdings. Effective this year, the role of vice chair will be filled by a man I am proud to call my son. Applause slammed into the room like surf against rocks. Daniel stood, handsome and serious, and shook Dad's hand while people stood and clapped as if they'd been waiting to be told when to do it. I clapped too, because my body remembers choreography even when my heart doesn't. Dad lifted a hand for quiet. "And the Lawson Fund our family trust will formalize to secure the future of our line." He let that word hang. Line. I could feel it snag in people's minds like a burr. He smiled, the benevolent ruler. "Details to follow, but tonight we celebrate Daniel's commitment to the Lawson name." I stared down at my plate. The knife beside my fork was sharp enough to reflect my face in tiny, fractured pieces. Not family, I thought. Not line. I remembered the white bracelet biting my wrist, the gold ones at the entrance glinting like little crowns. The junior associate at my table leaned toward me. "Congratulations," he whispered, as if I would be folded into this triumph by proximity. "Must be special." I swallowed something that wasn't food. "It's something," I said. "And now," Dad said, like a magician pulling a final scarf from his sleeve, "a little surprise." He gestured toward the screen that had been hidden behind the stage banner. It whirred to life. Photos began to play in a slow carousel. My father shaking hands with men whose names appeared in the business section. Daniel at age 7, missing 2 front teeth, holding a trophy. My parents on their wedding day. Daniel's graduation shot my face just out of frame. The house lit just like tonight. Then my breath caught. On the screen, colors bled into a familiar shape. A painting. My painting. One I had done 3 years ago. Abstract swirls in blues and golds, a commission for a downtown lobby that had paid my rent for months. Except the corner where my signature should have been was cropped out, or erased, or simply not shown. The caption beneath the image read, "Community Art Initiative, Lawson Foundation." The room murmured pleasantly, like they were tasting something sweet. I felt heat crawl up my neck. I had donated a small print for a silent auction once, yes, but this was the original, or a photo of it used as if it belonged to the narrative my father curated. I had never been asked. I had never consented to my art being turned into a slide in his legacy deck. The neighbor at my table followed my gaze. "Stunning piece," she said. "Who's the artist?" "I am," I said. She blinked. Oh, a microsecond later. "Well, that's nice for you." Nice. The quartet struck up something triumphant. Applause again. I heard my name somewhere across the room. Sabine. Maybe, saying it like a garnish on a cocktail. Alina did that one, yes, the artsy one. Laughter bubbled. Dad returned to the mic. "Every family member contributes in their way," he said, as if bestowing a compliment. "Some carry the legacy forward. Some. Add color. His eyes swept the room and didn't stop where I sat, but it felt like he was talking to me anyway. A benevolent smirk. The audience chuckled. He had crafted it perfectly. A line that could be read as praise, dipped in a truth that slapped me quietly in the face. Something inside me tilted. I could feel it like a picture frame knocked off center, almost imperceptible. Instantly obvious if you were the one who hung it straight. My hands were steady. My heart was not. "Let's raise a glass," Dad said. And I watched as flutes lifted and 100 mouths sipped champagne like they were swallowing virtue. I didn't lift mine. The junior associate noticed and frowned as if I had misstepped. "To family," he said, anxiously. "2 stories?" I whispered. Speeches ended. Music flooded back. People swarmed the stage to be near whatever future they thought proximity bought. I slipped away from table 12 and found the hallway that led to Dad's study. Old instincts guided me. There are paths in houses that become maps in your bones. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open. The study always felt like a theater. Dark bookshelves, that ridiculous globe bar in the corner, the heavy desk my father treated like an altar. Tonight, folders lay open as if the room were mid-thought. On the credenza, a stack of white envelopes were arranged with care. Each was sealed with a gold sticker stamped with the Lawson crest lions flanking a sword. The envelopes were labeled Board, Council, Family Trust. Footsteps behind me. I turned. Daniel hovered in the doorway, tie loosened, the fizz of champagne still clinging to him. He looked confused to find me there. "You okay?" "I'm fine." My own voice surprised me, calm as a lake with a storm gathering under it. I tapped the top envelope. Special announcement details. He shrugged. "You know, Dad." "Do I?" I said, and he flinched like I'd slapped him. "Alina," he ran a hand through his hair. "Look, the seating thing, he's obsessed with optics." I told him it was dumb. "You told him?" I smiled without humor. "What a relief," he sighed. "Don't start." "Don't start what?" "Asking why my art is being used without credit. Why the photographer took a Lawson line shot I wasn't in. Why my bracelet is a different color. Why 100 people just toasted family and Dad made a joke about me adding color like a decorative throw pillow." My voice rose. The storm inside surfaced. "What do you call it when someone tells you you're not family and then builds a stage to prove it?" Daniel shut the door gently, as if noise might shatter something fragile. "He's old school. He believes in tradition. He believes in control," I said. "And you believe in not disappointing him." A muscle in his jaw twitched. "You don't know everything?" "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me why he says I'm not family." Daniel looked down. He says things he doesn't mean. He meant it. He looked up at me then, eyes a little pleading, a little hard. "Don't blow this up tonight, please. For Mom." He reached for the door. "Come back to the party." "For Mom," I repeated, because that was the only thread I had left tying me to the wreckage. "Fine." I brushed past him. In the hallway, 2 board members glanced at me and then at each other. It's the way people do when they smell smoke and can't decide if it's their problem. I slipped into the powder room and locked the door. I leaned over the sink and stared at myself. The gold bracelet glinted at my wrist where the white plastic cut across a vein like a scar still forming. I could leave. I could call a ride and be gone in 10 minutes. Let the house swallow itself. But this wasn't just a party. It was a confirmation of a story my father had been writing about me since I learned to spell my name. That I was peripheral, decorative, optional. I splashed water on my face and pressed cool fingers to my eyes. When I opened them, I knew exactly what I would do when the time came. The seed of resolve I'd felt on the night I overheard him had sprouted into a narrow, strong green thing pushing through soil. I wouldn't yank it up too soon. Not yet, but it was there. I unlocked the door and stepped back into the music. People swayed, a beautiful lie moving in harmony. I found my mother at the edge of the dance floor. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. "You okay?" she asked. "Are you?" I asked back. Her mouth trembled and then steadied. "Dance with me," she said. And we did. We swayed in our small circle, two women holding onto each other in a room that didn't know what to do with us. She rested her head against mine for a second. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Me too," I said. For what? I wasn't sure. For being here. For staying. For not stopping him years ago. For not saving her. For still wanting something from a man who kept telling me I didn't belong. When the song ended, a server appeared with a tray of tiny desserts that looked like jewelry. I took one and the sweetness turned to ash on my tongue. The room shimmered. Applause erupted again as Dad introduced Daniel for his own speech. Daniel's voice carried cleanly, warm, and carefully humble. "I'm honored," he said, "to continue what my father started." He thanked the board. He thanked Sabine. He thanked my mother for her support. He did not say my name. I moved toward the doors, the ones near table 12, and slipped outside under the guise of air. The night was crisp, the stars indifferent. The tent glowed, the house blazed. From here music floated out like a memory of something that had never quite been mine. Behind me, a voice cleared. I turned. It was the woman with the clipboard from earlier, her bun a little less severe now. She held out a gold bracelet. "Ms. Lawson," she said, a little breathless. "There was a mistake. You're supposed to have this." I looked at the bracelet. It shone like a cheap apology. "Who told you that?" She hesitated. "Mr. Lawson asked that all immediate family be identified for the later meeting." She struggled with the right word. The private briefing. The private briefing. Of course there would be one. The envelopes in the study. Family trust. A room where decisions would be sealed and the rest of the night would be the photos they staged to distract from it. "I see," I said. I took the bracelet. The plastic snapped as I switched them, white for gold. The gold felt warmer, like a lie with good lighting. Through the side hallway after the second set of speeches, she said. He was very clear on the timing. She offered me a small smile that carried the quiet desperation of someone who needed to keep this job. "I'm sorry about earlier." "It's not your fault," I said. "You were following a list." She nodded and disappeared back into the house, swallowed by light. I stared at the gold circle on my wrist. Immediate family. I could hear Dad's voice shaping the word to suit his needs. If he could make a picture tell a story by cropping a signature, he could make a family with borders that moved when it was convenient. But tonight, he wanted me there. He wanted me as a prop for a meeting that would formalize my erasure. Look, he would say to the board, to the lawyer, to the mirror later, I included her. And when the paper slid across the table, I would be expected to nod. The way a painting nods quietly from a wall, present, framed, voiceless. I looked toward the driveway. A black car had pulled in while I was outside. It wasn't a guest sedan or a caterer's van. It was something else, discreet and new. The windows dark. The driver stepped out and opened the back door. A man in a navy suit emerged, carrying a sleek leather briefcase. He moved with the unremarkable grace of someone used to being essential without being seen. He glanced at the house, then at the bracelet on his own wrist gold. A lawyer, I thought. The lawyer. I watched him go inside. Then I followed, not toward table 12 this time, not toward the band or the bar or the center of the staged celebration. I moved along the edge through the side hallway the clipboard woman had mentioned. Past the powder room where I had practiced not crying, past the study where envelopes waited like verdicts. The air in that hallway felt different, cooler, thinner, like a place where the temperature is controlled to preserve artifacts. At the end, a door stood open, and beyond it, a smaller room glowed. Dad's private conference room. A few people were already inside: Daniel, Sabine, two board members I recognized, and the man with the briefcase. My mother hovered near the door, twisting her ring. Dad entered behind me, and when he saw me there, a brief flicker of satisfaction crossed his face, as if the set were finally complete. "Good," he said. "We're all here." He didn't know it, but for the first time all night, he was right. We were all here: the man who thought he owned the story, the son who had been cast as its hero, the mother who kept it from unraveling with the fine thread of her silence, the woman in red who loved the spotlight, the board members who loved the smell of money, the lawyer who loved the law, and meet the daughter who, tonight, decided that if they were going to call this a family, then I would define what that meant. I stood just inside the doorway, the gold bracelet flashing under the chandelier as if it had been mine all along. My father looked at the lawyer and said with silky satisfaction, "Shall we begin?" I didn't answer. Not yet. But inside, the storm went still. Not because it had passed, but because it had decided where to land. The air in that conference room was heavier than the ballroom outside, as if all the oxygen had been siphoned away and replaced with the smell of leather chairs, old wood polish, and my father's self-importance. The room itself was smaller than I remembered, just long enough for a polished table that gleamed like a frozen lake, surrounded by backed chairs. The lawyer had already set up. His briefcase rested neatly on the table, papers stacked in precise lines. A pen with gold trim positioned exactly where my father would sit. This man didn't need to speak yet. His silence carried its own authority. I hovered near the doorway, my hand brushing the frame as if testing whether I was allowed to step through. My father noticed, of course. He always noticed weakness. "Alina," he said smoothly, gesturing toward the far end of the table. "Take a seat. We're about to start." His voice made it sound like an invitation, but everyone in that room knew it was an order. I walked in deliberately slow and chose a chair not where he had indicated, but one directly opposite him. A ripple of surprise passed through the others. Daniel shifted, uncomfortable. Sabine's red lips pressed into a thin line. My mother's hands twisted at her lap, her wedding band turning against her finger as if trying to escape. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" His voice was soft, practiced. My father gave him a tight smile. "Yes, let's." The lawyer unfolded a document with the solemnity of a priest reading scripture. "As per Mr. Lawson's request, we are here tonight to formalize the structure of both the Lawson Foundation and the Lawson Family Trust. All immediate heirs are present as required." The word heirs caught in the air like smoke. My father leaned back in his chair, satisfied. The lawyer continued. "The trust will encompass all business holdings, real estate assets, financial accounts, and intellectual properties under Mr. Lawson's name. The distribution plan is as follows." He paused to glance at my father, who gave a slight nod. 51% of all assets to Mr. Daniel Lawson, effective immediately upon succession. 25% to the foundation under Daniel Lawson's leadership as vice chair. 20% to. His eyes flicked to the paper again. Mrs. Anna Lawson, in a protected account. I waited. My chest tightened. The lawyer didn't look at me. "And the remaining 4%, he said carefully, "has been earmarked for philanthropic initiatives at Mr. Lawson's discretion." Silence. I stared at the paper in front of him, though I couldn't read the words from here. 4%. That was it. I wasn't even mentioned. Not by name. Something hot and sharp shot up my throat, but I kept my face still. My father, however, was watching me with the faintest curl of amusement on his lips. "Not family," he had said once, and here it was, written into law. Daniel spoke first, his voice tight. "Dad, Elena's not listed." My father waved his hand. "She chose her own path. She didn't want this." "I never said that," I snapped. My voice cracked the silence. My father leaned forward, his hands folded. "You didn't have to. Every choice you made said it for you. You left the family business. You chased childish dreams. You made it clear where your loyalties lie." I felt the room shift, eyes darting between us. My mother's lips parted, but she said nothing. She always said nothing. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, uncomfortable. "To be clear, Mr. Lawson, as per your directive, Ms. Lawson is not a named beneficiary." "Correct," my father said. He leaned back again, smug. "She's not family." The words hit the room like a grenade. Daniel sat straighter. "Dad, come on. That's not fair." "Life isn't fair," my father snapped. "She's been nothing but a drain. Do you remember who paid for your tuition, Alina? Do you remember who kept a roof over your head while you wasted time painting instead of earning?" My jaw clenched. "You mean the roof Mom kept standing while you gambled money on bad deals?" The roof she made a home while you treated us like tenants in your empire. His face darkened, but I wasn't finished. Years of swallowed words were clawing their way out. And as for tuition, I worked 2 jobs to pay for school. You didn't spend a cent on me. You saved it all for Daniel because he was your golden boy. I had to build everything on my own while you pretended I didn't exist. Gasps whispered through the room. Even the lawyer looked startled. My father slammed his hand on the table. Enough. You don't speak to me that way in my house. Your house? I shot back. Funny you should say that. I reached into my bag, the same bag I had carried in quietly, unremarkably. My fingers brushed the edge of the envelope inside, smooth, heavy. I pulled it out and placed it on the table with a deliberate thud. The gold seal glinted under the chandelier. What's this? My father barked. The lawyer frowned, recognizing the mark before my father did. His brows furrowed. Ms. Lawson, where did you get this? From someone who thought the truth mattered more than my father's lies, I said evenly. I slid the envelope across the table. The lawyer hesitated, then broke the seal with careful hands. His eyes scanned the document inside. The room held its breath. Finally, he looked up. His voice carried a new weight. This is a codicil, an amendment to the original trust signed and notarized 3 years ago. My father's expression cracked. What? That's impossible. The lawyer continued, ignoring him. It states that in the event of succession, the Lawson estate is to be divided equally between both children Daniel Lawson and Alina Lawson at 50% each. The room erupted. Daniel's mouth fell open. Sabine's hand flew to her lips. My mother let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. And my father's face drained of color as if the very walls of his empire had shifted beneath him. That's a forgery, he roared. The lawyer shook his head. The signatures are valid, witnessed and filed. It overrides the directives you attempted to establish tonight. My father turned on me, his eyes blazing. How dare you? I cut him off, my voice trembling but steady. All my life, you told me I wasn't family. You erased me from pictures, from speeches, from your precious plans. But Mom didn't let you erase me from everything. I turned to my mother then. Her eyes were wet, but she nodded, her chin quivering. She did this. Daniel whispered. Yes, I said. 3 years ago. She made sure I'd be protected. She signed it with him. The lawyer confirmed with a solemn nod. Mrs. Lawson's signature is here as co-trustee. It is legally binding. The silence that followed was unbearable and delicious all at once. My father's mouth worked soundlessly. His fists clenched, unclenched like a man drowning who refuses to admit the water is real. You tricked me, he spat at my mother. She straightened in her chair. For once, her voice did not tremble. No, Richard. I protected my daughter. Something you never had the decency to do. The room froze. Even Daniel stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. My father pointed a shaking finger at me. You don't deserve this. You've never earned. I laughed bitterly. I earned every scar you gave me. Every night I went without your approval. Every dollar I worked for while Daniel was handed everything. And now I've earned this too. The lawyer folded the codicil neatly, placing it atop my father's rejected documents. Legally speaking, he said calmly, there is nothing more to discuss. The trust is already filed with both beneficiaries named. Tonight's meeting is, at best, ceremonial. Ceremonial, the word gutted my father. He slumped back in his chair, defeated but still seething. His empire had been wrestled from his grip by a woman he had underestimated his entire life. His wife and the daughter he had dismissed as irrelevant. I met his eyes, and for the first time, he looked away. First, the lawyer's words settled like a bell tone that kept ringing long after the sound was gone. For a second, no one moved. Even the hum of the air vent seemed to pause. As if the room itself were waiting to see what my father would do when a seam he'd stitched for years finally ripped. He didn't disappoint, at least not in predictability. "This is sabotage," Dad hissed, snatching for the codicil as if he could tear the ink out of the paper with his nails. The lawyer's hand was quicker, palming the document with a serene smile that probably cost $500 an hour. "Mr. Lawson," the lawyer said softly, "you and Mrs. Lawson executed this amendment together. It supersedes any informal intentions expressed since. If you would like to challenge it, you may do so in court, but I would advise against it. The signatures were witnessed, the notary is independent, and the filing is clean. You will lose." The last sentence didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like weather, unavoidable, entirely impersonal. Dad's gaze skittered to my mother. "You conspired with her." Mom didn't flinch. "I protected our daughter," she said again. And something in the way she held her chin told me that sentence had been waiting inside her like a seed under frost. Daniel cleared his throat, color returning to his face. "Dad, let's be practical. 50-50 doesn't change the Foundation's mission. We can still move forward. You'll do nothing," Dad snapped. But it came out thin, like a drum whose skin had been punctured. His eyes cut back to me, desperate and hateful in equal parts. "You planned this. You waited to humiliate me." I opened my mouth and then closed it. The part of me that had learned to defend every feeling wanted to say yes. Yes, I did wait. Yes, I did plan. But the truth was simpler and sharper. "I didn't wait to humiliate you," I said. "I waited to stop you." Sabine shifted, red dress whispering against leather. "How does this impact the succession announcement?" she asked, voice honeyed but strategic. I could almost see the calculations downloading behind her eyes. The lawyer folded his hands. "It changes it." He looked to me, then to Daniel. "You are both beneficiaries of the estate. Governance over business holdings and the Foundation will, from tonight, require dual sign-off from the co-beneficiaries or the co-trustee designated as tiebreaker as stipulated Mrs. Lawson. For the next 12 months, all eyes slid to my mother. She smoothed her skirt with a trembling palm. "I signed that," she said. 1 year, just 2. Stabilize. The board members in the room, Harvey, with the 2 white teeth, and Celeste with the pearls, blinked, as if waking to a language they only half spoke. "Richard," Harvey ventured, "this is unexpected. But if we all remain aligned publicly, we can message this." "No," I said, surprising even myself with the steadiness in my voice. "We won't message another lie." I looked to my mother. "May I?" She nodded, and it felt like a key turning in a lock. I turned to the lawyer. "Is there anything that prevents us from addressing the full guest list now?" He understood immediately. "Nothing at all." Dad laughed ugly and low. "You're going to make a scene." "I'm going to tell the truth," I said. Inside, something clicked into place, the same sensation as when a painting finally decides what it wants to be, and your hand just follows. "And while we're at it, we're going to fix a few other things." I reached for my bag again. The second envelope was thicker. Not legal thick evidence thick. I slid it to the lawyer. "If I'm going to share air with my father's story, I want it clean." He leafed through the documents inside. Emails, invoices. A printed screenshot of the Foundation's website with my painting front and center, captioned as Lawson Foundation commissioned artwork. Sabine leaned forward. "What is this?" "The receipts," I said quietly. "Of what he's claimed and what he's taken. Of whose work he's made look like his gift. Not just mine." I tapped 3 separate invoices. "This is from a youth arts program that never received the second half of their grant, even though the annual report says the funds were dispersed. This is a community mural photographed for a press release with Dad holding a brush he never dipped in paint." I looked up. "And this is my peace crop to hide my signature used without permission in the Foundation brochure, which was sent to donors who were told it was commissioned by the Lawson family." The lawyer's eyebrows rose an inch. Daniel's shoulders slumped, as if someone had quietly removed the scaffolding he'd been standing on. Dad scoffed. "PR embellishment. Everyone does it." "Not anymore," I said. The lawyer closed the folder. "I recommend we move to the announcement," he said smoothly, as if we were discussing the order of courses at dinner. "Before rumor outruns reality." Dad shoved back his chair so hard it clipped the wall. I won't stand on my own stage and be dressed down by my ungrateful daughter. Then sit, I said, and I stepped past him. He reached for my wrist, caught the gold bracelet between two fingers, and tugged like he might peel it off. The action was instinctive, ugly, old. You don't get to wear this. Something inside me that had been careful for years stopped being careful. I held his gaze. Try a silence landed thick and electric. He let go. I walked out first. The hallway felt different, now less like a museum, more like a corridor backstage. I could hear the band in the other room easing from a jazz standard into a pop song to keep the donors loose. The lights in the dining room threw soft nets over people's faces. Laughter swelled in harmless bubbles. 100 stories were being told that had nothing to do with the one opening like a trapdoor under the stage. The clipboard woman saw us coming and startled, then recalibrated. I didn't need to say a word. She moved briskly to the sound engineer and whispered. The music dissolved at the end of a phrase. And the MC, one of Dad's golf buddies, with a voice like a morning radio host, cleared his throat into the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, he lilted. If we could have your attention for a brief moment, Mr. Lawson has one more update to share. The room turned obedient as a field of sunflowers. My father took one step toward the stage and then stopped, realizing that I had already climbed the 2 shallow steps and reached the microphone first. You never plan for the exact temperature of a moment like that. You can imagine it. You can script what you'll say. But standing there, looking at the people who had been trained to clap on cue, looking at table 1 and table 12 and the aisle of glassware that reflected every face twice over, I felt the weight of it and the strange lightness, too. Hi, I said, and it sounded almost conversational. My voice came back at me from the speakers, bigger than it felt leaving my mouth. I'm Alina Lawson. A ripple moved through the crowd. Names rolled like coins in slots until they matched what they saw. The daughter. The artist. The other one, and I have 2 announcements, I said. One about what my father has planned, and one about what we're going to do instead. Dad's jaw ticked. I didn't look at him. First, I said this straightforward part. I gestured to the lawyer who had taken a place unobtrusively to the side of the stage. His presence was a seal. My parents executed a codicil to their trust 3 years ago. From tonight forward, the Lawson estate passes to both of their children equally. That means decisions about the family business and the foundation will be made by my brother and me together, with my mother as tiebreaker for the next year. I paused, letting that land, letting the surprise wash around the room like a wave around pilings. And second, I said, so that the Lawson Foundation can actually honor its name. We're implementing immediate changes. I looked at the board. Tonight. You could feel the collective intake of breath. The temperature of the room tilted. Effective now? I continued. Grants that have been delayed will be dispersed within 30 days. I nodded to the clipboard woman, who blinked, then nodded back, as if her checklist had just sprouted a new column titled Reality. We will commission an independent audit of the last 5 years of foundation finances. That audit will be made public, and any projects or artworks used for publicity will be credited accurately, starting with mine. I glanced at the screen behind me. The operator hesitated, then followed my cue as the image that had earlier floated past in my father's slideshow reappeared, my painting in blues and golds. This time, the full canvas, my signature visible. The caption corrected. Floodplain by Alina Lawson 2019. Courtesy of the artist. A murmur sped around the room like dry grass catching flame. At table 12, the elderly neighbor, she of the lecture about ink, pressed her lips together and nodded once, as if retroactively acknowledging a debt. At table 1, Celeste's pearls shifted on her clavicle as she leaned to whisper to Harvey, who had stopped smiling. Dad mounted the stage then, moving into my space like a storm front. Thank you, Alina, he said to the crowd with a smile that tried to wring the mic back to his hand. My daughter is passionate. Misguided in some facts. But Richard the lawyer said into his own mic, not loudly, just enough. This is accurate. Laughter burst out in a few scattered places, nervous, traitorous, gleeful. Sabine looked like she wanted to crawl under the nearest linen-draped tablecloth. Dad stared at the lawyer, then at me. I met his gaze and held it. This time he didn't look away. He flared. "You are embarrassing this family." "You did that when you cropped out my name," I said, not yelling, not trembling, just saying it plainly now that saying it mattered. He took one step nearer. The front row, the donors, the like family, leaned back imperceptibly. He forgot the mic in his hand, amplified everything, and hissed, "You were never meant to be in this room." The words went through the sound system like oil onto water, audible, slick, unmistakable. The silence that followed was different than the one in the conference room. This one had witnesses. Even the band had frozen mid-gesture. Somewhere near table 3, a fork slipped and chimed against a plate like a small bell that said, "We heard that." I could have let it hang there. I could have let him swing on his own rope. But what I had planned, what had pulled me forward since the powder room mirror, required one more step. "You told me I wasn't family," I said into the microphone. "And tonight you tried to write that into the law. But here's the thing about family. It's not a brand. It's not a line on a seating chart. It's not even a name you stamp on brochures." I looked at my mother, at her small, steady shape near the front. It's the people who show up for you when it costs them. It's what my mother did when she made sure I could not be erased. People shifted, a collective swallow. My mother lifted a hand without meaning to, the way people reach towards something they're not sure they're allowed to touch. "And it turns out," I said, "there are a lot of people like me. People used but not credited, invited but not included." So here's the final part. I turned slightly to show the room the file in my hand. I have documentation of funds that didn't go where they promised to go. I have emails instructing staff to crop signatures off artwork for cleaner visuals. I have receipts from events where checks were pledged on stage and never written once the cameras went home. I will not sweep that under the gold rug, and I will not let a foundation with my name attached continue that way. Now the murmur wasn't a murmur. It was talk. That low, eager rumble of scandal finally finding a voice. Phones rose, camera lenses blinking open like cautious eyes. Dad's face blazed, a warning red. "Turn that off," he barked at the AV tech, at the staff, at anyone. No recording. The lawyer stepped forward, crisp as a page. "No one here is bound to non-disclosure," he said mildly. "The event is open. The announcements are public." "Shut up, Dad," snapped, finally letting the mask slide entirely. "All of you, out." He stabbed a finger at the board members. Gestured toward Daniel as if ordering him to heel. Something broke, then not in me. In the room. The donor strain, too, sent a losing horse, shifted their weight away from him. Sabine took a half step back, that practiced smile, freezing, cracking. Daniel looked from our father to me. I saw the boy he'd been under, the man he was trying to be, the boy who used to stand between Dad and me during arguments and offer me his half of the blanket. The man who had enjoyed the ease that came with being chosen. His mouth tightened. Then he turned to the microphone. "Alina is right," he said. It was a soft sentence, but it landed with force. Heads pivoted. Dad blinked. Daniel swallowed. "We can't build anything worth having if we lie about what it's made of." He took a breath. "As co-beneficiary and vestiaire, I support an independent audit and the immediate release of delayed funds." He looked at me. "And I'm sorry for what I didn't say earlier. For what I didn't see." His eyes flicked to Dad for going along. That was the pivot, the click of the lock. The board members recalculated as one organism. Celeste lifted her chin ostentatiously and said, as if it had been her idea all along, "Transparency is foundational." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I let the new shape of the room settle into my bones. Dad made one last lunge for control. "You ungrateful," he began. And then he did the thing that would haunt him in headlines by morning. He yanked the microphone from my hand. Or tried to. The cord held. The sudden tug sent feedback shrieking through the speakers. Reflexively, he shouted over it. Voice distorted, ugly. "You're not family." The sound ricocheted off glass and crystal. No one needed me to translate. He had said it now, not in a kitchen or a conference room, but into a sound system with 100 witnesses and a dozen rolling cameras. I didn't fight him for the mic. I stepped aside. Let the silence after his shout become the purest kind of indictment. Then I took the second microphone from the stand meant for the band singer. My voice came through clear, separate, and strangely gentle. I walked into this room with the lawyer. I said, "Because I am family, and because I intend to act like it." I gestured toward my mother. "Mom," I said softly into the mic, "would you come up here?" She startled. Her hand rose and fell. Then she moved almost apologetically to the front of the stage. Daniel stepped forward and offered her his hand. She took it. When she turned to face the room, there was a tremor in her mouth. Yes, but there was something else, too. A straightness in her spine I hadn't seen since I was little, and she used to braid my hair tight so it wouldn't fall in my eyes. "Anna Lawson," I said, letting the name echo. Co-trustee, tiebreaker mother. The room applauded, tentative at first. Thing building, pressured by the need to align with the new center of gravity. Mom lifted a palm as if to quiet them, but it only made them louder. She glanced at me, a question in her eyes. "Say what you want," I whispered. She took the mic. Her voice wasn't big, but the room leaned to catch it. The way you lean to hear a story you want to be true. "I love my family," she said, "both my children. And I will not allow any part of this foundation or this house to tell them otherwise." She looked at my father then, not beseeching, not angry, just finished. "Richard, you taught me to be silent in public. I was wrong to learn it. Tonight, I am unlearning it." The applause now wasn't tentative. It rolled, picked up by people eager to be on the side of the moment that would be clipped and posted before dessert. Security hour, security, not dads arrived near the edge of the stage, summoned quietly by the clipboard woman who had, I suspected, been waiting her whole career to be useful to the right person rather than the loudest one. They didn't touch my father. They didn't need to. He stepped back, flushing the exact color of the carpet, and walked down the stairs alone. He didn't leave. Not yet. Pride is a heavy thing. It keeps you standing when sitting would be kinder. He took a chair at the edge of the dance floor like any other guest who'd had too much to drink and not enough to eat, and watched his own party slowly spin away from him. I turned back to the mic. "Two quick specifics," I said, which got a ripple of laughter, goodwill laughter. Relief laughter, the kind you make when the air just got breathable. First, a public acknowledgement to the artisan community orgs whose work was used without credit or full payment. "We will correct the record and cut checks within 30 days. You'll hear from me." A wave of scattered cheers, honest and small. Second, the Lawson Foundation will be restructured over the year so that a minimum of 85% of donations go to programs, not dinners. That one got applause that shook the silverware. And then I did the thing that surprised even me. Finally, I said to everyone here who came in good faith, "Enjoy your night. Eat dessert. Dance. This house has seen enough nights where a woman cried in the kitchen while the music played. Not tonight." The band leader, a woman with a pixie cut and the calm of someone who has seen every species of party, caught my eye. I nodded. She lifted her guitar. Music flowed out again, not as spectacle this time, but as relief. People stood, unsure, then decided to stay where the light was. That's the thing about scandal. After the spark and the burn, most people want a song to hold on to while the ash settles. I stepped off the stage and the wave hit hands. Congratulations. Sleek smiles sliding over to meet the new arrangement. A councilwoman clasped my hand with politics-perfect empathy. A journalist asked for a quote. The mayor's ad, no longer at table 12, apparently requested the audit timeline. I answered what I could, recorded what I couldn't. The clipboard woman hovered like a guardian fairy with a logistical wand. Through it all, Daniel stayed near Minot, close enough to usurp the moment, not far enough to be indecisive. When a lull came, he leaned in. "You were brave," he said. Then, quieter, I should have been braver sooner. We were children longer than we knew, I said. Not an excuse. He scrubbed a hand over his face. But it's what I've got. Then keep going, I said. We have a lot to fix. He nodded. We will. He looked toward our father. The man sat with his back to us. Speen, whispering furious. Tidy reassurances into an ear that wasn't hearing. He'll come for this. I know. The thought didn't scare me the way it would have yesterday. We have law. We have light. And we have Mom. He nodded, swallowing. We have Mom. As if summoned, she appeared at my elbow. A plate with 2 small lemon tarts balanced on it, ridiculous and perfect. I stole these, she said. A conspiratorial glint I had not seen since I was 6, and she snuck extra frosting onto a birthday cupcake. From the VIP dessert tray? Scandal, I said, mock serious. I'm a new woman, she said. We ate standing up, laughing for no reason, except that relief is funny when you've been holding your breath for years. Across the room, the projector still showed my painting. I watched people actually read the caption this time. A young woman in a black dress took a photo of it. Then of me, then of the caption again. I didn't hate it. It didn't feel like stealing. It felt like something being put back where it belonged. The rest of the night slid into a strange, beautiful normal. People danced. A caterer in white sneakers told me quietly that her sister ran one of the community orgs in my folder and asked if it was true the money would come. Yes, I said. Hold me to it. She squeezed my arm so hard it almost bruised. At some point, Dad stood. He didn't look at me. He walked out into the night with his shoulders square as if to suggest he'd chosen the departure. Sabine followed her red dress, a slow bleed through the crowd. No one stopped them. No one had to. Exits can be the most public part of a performance. I knew there would be fallout. Tomorrow, the board would circle me with questions that smelled like support and sounded like control. Lawyers would draft letters. Donors would test the wind. Dad would rage in emails at 3 a.m. We would have to actually do the audit, and it would tell us things we'd need to repair at cost to pride and pocket. But the worst thing, the thing that had ruled me long after I thought I'd outgrown, it was over. He'd said it out loud, and it hadn't killed me. He'd tried to seal it in paper, and we had unsealed it with better paper. And we hadn't done it whispering in corners. We had done it on stage. It felt like standing in a house after a storm and realizing the frame was sound. The roof could be patched. The walls could be repainted. The floorboards, though scuffed, still held. As the night thinned and people drifted toward the valet, I slipped outside alone for the first time since it began. The stars were the same as they'd been when I ran out earlier, for air indifferent, steady. The lawn smelled like cut grass and champagne. A moth panicked in the porch light and then found the dark again. Footsteps behind me. Daniel, he took the town car, he said. Sabine went with him. Of course. He offered me a lopsided smile. You know, when we were kids and he'd shout, I used to pretend the house could hold it, that the walls soaked it up and kept it from getting to you. He laughed, embarrassed. Stupid. Not stupid, I said. Just wishful. He nodded. Now we hold it. He looked out across the tented lawn. We hold it and decide what belongs and what gets thrown out. For a year at least, I said, thinking of Mom's tiebreaker clause. After that, we'll have to be good at disagreeing. We can practice, he said. A valet jogged by, keys jangling, and we stepped aside. The night air laid a cool hand on the back of my neck. When I shivered, Daniel shrugged out of his jacket and did something he hadn't done since high school. Put it around my shoulders without asking and didn't make a joke. Go sleep, he said. Tomorrow will be loud. Tomorrow will be honest, I corrected. I can live with loud. We stood there a minute more to people who had finally stopped letting someone else's echo tell them who they were. Then we went back inside to find our mother. We found her exactly where I hoped we would, in the kitchen, barefoot, telling the staff to box up leftover desserts for the crew and the band, thanking people by name. When she saw us, she smiled the smallest, fiercest smile. Help me carry these, she said, handing us each a tray. No stage, no spotlight. Just a task. A family thing. We did. And in that small choreography, the three of us moving around each other like we'd rehearsed forever, felt the justice I'd wanted more than revenge. Not his ruin, but our repair. He had humiliated me into becoming the person who could humiliate him back. Instead, I delivered the thing that punished him more. A public redefinition of what the Lawson name meant without him standing in the center. When the last box was closed and the lights in the tent went down to a quiet hush, I pressed my hand gold bracelet and all against the kitchen doorway and listened. The house, which had echoed with his voice for so long, sounded different. Less haunted. Less hollow. A place newly preparing to be a home. I thought of my painting on the screen and the caption corrected. I thought of the youth program whose director would open an email from me in the morning with an apology and an attached wire receipt. I thought of the girls and boys in those rooms who would hear their names said from a stage. Someday, without a crop or an asterisk. Ready? Daniel asked. Ready? I said. We stepped into the dim hallway together. In the foyer, the portrait of my father, the commissioned oil with his imperious smile still, hung in the place of honor where Mom's seascape used to be. I stopped, tipping my head. We need to move that, I said. Tomorrow, Mom said, coming up behind me. Her eyes followed mine to the painting. First thing, and put the seascape back. I asked. She smiled. And put the seascape back. I turned off the last light. The house exhaled. And for the first time in years, so did I. The next morning. Sunlight poured through my apartment windows as if the universe had decided to stage its own applause. It didn't feel real at first. My body was heavy, my head still buzzing from voices, flashes, clinking glasses. But then the notifications started. My phone pulsed with messages, some from numbers I didn't recognize, some from people I hadn't heard from in years. Saw the clip? You were amazing. So proud of you. Screenshots of my father's words, "You're not family," were already circulating online. Headlines bloomed like weeds. Lawson Legacy Gala turns explosive. Daughter denied, daughter defies. The family trust bombshell. For years, my father had controlled the story. But in one night, the story had escaped him. I set the phone down. I needed silence. Needed to hear something that wasn't curated outrage or admiration. In the kitchen, I made coffee slowly, deliberately, grounding myself in the ritual. Scoop, pour, wait. The smell filled the air. When I took the first sip, I closed my eyes. For the first time in my adult life, the word family didn't sting. It tasted new. Unfinished, maybe, but mine to define. Later that day, we met back at the house. Not his house anymore. Ours. My mother. Daniel. And when the three of us standing in the foyer beneath that arrogant portrait, "Let's do it," Mom said simply. Daniel grabbed the ladder from the garage. Together we unhooked the massive frame. It was heavier than I expected. I grunted under the weight and Daniel muttered figures his ego in oil paint. We laughed in a way that felt like an exorcism. We carried the portrait down to the basement, leaned it against the far wall, and covered it with an old sheet. Out of sight. Out of power. Then we brought back Mom's seascape. I'd almost forgotten how much I loved its stormy blues, foamy whites, the horizon stubborn and endless. We hung it in the exact spot it had been before, centered above the entryway table. When we stepped back, the house looked different, warmer, truer. Mom touched my arm. "I never stopped seeing it there," she whispered. "Me neither," I said. In the days that followed, my father went quiet. Not just at home. He wasn't even at home anymore. Sabine posted a carefully cropped photo of herself on a yacht, sunglasses shielding her expression. No father in sight. But silence doesn't mean stillness. Rumors swirled. He was meeting with his old allies, trying to mount a legal challenge, threatening to expose others if they didn't back him. But the codicil was ironclad, and his outburst, caught on dozens of phones, had made him toxic in ways no PR firm could bleach clean. He had wanted legacy. He had wanted admiration. Instead, he had written himself into a cautionary tale. I didn't gloat. I didn't chase updates. I let him fade. For the first time in my life, I didn't orbit his gravity. Daniel and I dove into the work. The audit began. Hard truths surfaced: more missing funds, more embellishments my father had signed off on. It was exhausting, humiliating, and liberating all at once. Every time we corrected a record, cut a late check, or issued a public statement with real numbers instead of gloss, I felt lighter. People expected us to fracture under the strain. They whispered, "The siblings will fight. The artist and the lawyer. Oil and water." But we didn't. We argued. Yes, passionately. I wanted transparency that sometimes felt brutal. He wanted diplomacy that sometimes felt like delay. But we stayed in the room. We listened. We compromised. Because now, for the first time, we weren't fighting for Dad's approval. We were building something that had space for both of us. And Mom was everywhere, not silent anymore. She chaired meetings, vetoed nonsense, reminded us to eat when hours slipped away. At night, she called me just to say goodnight, her voice soft but steady. It was like learning she had been fluent in a language of strength all along, but only now allowed herself to speak it. One evening, after another long day of damage control, I found myself alone in the conference room. The same room where Dad had once tried to erase me with ink. I stood at the head of the table, the codicil framed now behind glass on the wall, not as a weapon, but as a reminder. I traced my fingers over the edge of the polished wood. I thought about the girl I had been at 12, clutching a sketchbook in a backyard full of balloons, hearing the adults laugh when my father dismissed me. I thought about the college student working double shifts to pay for canvases while Daniel's tuition. Bills were covered without question. I thought about every time I'd walked into that house and felt smaller than the walls. And then I thought about the night of the gala. Standing on stage, hearing him say the words that had haunted me, or not family, and realizing that saying them out loud had stripped them of their power. The truth is, family is not something someone else can give or take away. Family is what you choose to fight for, what you choose to protect, what you refuse to let die even when someone else tries to kill it. I was family all along. He just didn't see it. Weeks later, at a small community center on the east side of town, we held a modest event. Not a gala, not a spectacle. Just a gathering. Kids from the youth arts program painted banners. Local musicians played. We announced the release of delayed funds, signed checks in public, and handed them to the directors, with cameras flashing not for vanity, but for accountability. At the end, one of the kids, a girl with paint smudged on her cheek, handed me a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing. Messy, colorful, wild. She had written my name at the bottom. Not Lawson. Not Ms. Alina. Just Alina. I folded it carefully and tucked it into my bag. That one piece of paper meant more to me than any inheritance. Sometimes I wonder if Dad will ever call, if he'll ever apologize. Part of me wants him to. Part of me doesn't care anymore. His silence is its own confession. What matters is this: we are no longer living in his shadow. The Lawson name now belongs to my mother, my brother, and me, not as a crown, but as a tool. A name that funds classrooms and murals and after-school programs. A name that finally means something worth carrying. The night he told me I wasn't family, I believed him. But walking into that room with the lawyer, I learned the most important truth of all. No one gets to decide who you are. No one gets to erase you from your own story. And sometimes, the sweetest revenge isn't destroying the person who hurt you. It's building a life so full of truth, justice, and love that they can no longer stand at the center of it. I am Alina Lawson. I am family. And this time, the story is mine. And that's how it all ended. My father tried to erase me, but in the end, it was his own legacy that disappeared. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, don't forget to give this video a like. It really helps more people find these stories. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss the next tale of betrayal, revenge, and justice served. Trust me, the next story is even wilder. Until then, remember, the truth always comes out.